They saw a black woman step out of a $180,000 luxury car and decided that alone was enough to make her a suspect. The rain had just started to fall, light and steady, turning the glow of streetlights into blurred reflections across the polished asphalt as traffic slowed along the boulevard. Engines humming, tires whispering against wet pavement, and right there in the center lane, a sleek black Mercedes S-Class sat idling, its headlights cutting through the mist like something out of place. Something that didn't belong in the eyes of the two officers pulling up behind it, their patrol SUV flashing red and blue in sharp pulses that painted the entire street in accusation before a single word was even spoken. Officer Daniel Hayes stepped out first, shoulders squared, jaw tight, the kind of posture that didn't ask questions but assumed answers, his partner lingering just behind him, quieter, watching, but not intervening. Not yet. Hayes adjusted his vest and walked toward the driver's side with measured steps, each one deliberate, each one carrying the weight of a decision already made long before. He reached the window. Inside the car, Vanessa Carter rested her hands calmly on the steering wheel, her posture straight, her expression composed, the soft glow from the dashboard illuminating her face just enough to show that she wasn't afraid, not even a little. And when Hayes knocked on the glass, sharp and impatient, she didn't flinch. She simply lowered the window halfway, just enough for her voice to pass through without inviting anything else in. "License and registration," he said, his tone flat but edged with something colder, something heavier than routine. Vanessa reached slowly into her bag, movements precise, controlled, the kind of calm that didn't match the situation unfolding around her, and that alone seemed to irritate him more than anything. He glanced at the interior, the leather, the details, the unmistakable signs of wealth, and something in his expression shifted, not curiosity, not surprise, but disbelief, the kind that turns quickly into suspicion. "This your car?" he asked, tilting his head slightly, already expecting the answer to confirm what he believed. Vanessa met his eyes, steady, unshaken. "Yes, officer," she replied, her voice even, measured, almost quiet, but clear enough to cut through the rain. Hayes let out a short breath, almost a laugh, shaking his head as he stepped back slightly, looking the car over again like it might suddenly reveal a hidden truth that justified what he was about to do next. Behind them, a few bystanders had already slowed down, some pulling out their phones, the subtle shift of attention spreading through the street like a ripple, and Vanessa noticed it. Of course she did. But her expression didn't change. She simply placed her license on the edge of the window, offering it without resistance, without urgency, as if time itself wasn't pressing in from every direction. Hayes took it, glanced down, then back at her, and something about her name seemed to linger in his mind for half a second longer than expected, but not long enough to stop him, not long enough to make him reconsider. "Step out of the vehicle," he said, this time firmer, louder, the authority in his voice rising just enough to draw more attention. Vanessa paused, just for a moment, not out of fear, but as if measuring something unseen, something beyond the immediate tension, and then she spoke again, calm as ever. "Officer, you might want to double-check that." The words hung there, quiet but deliberate, almost lost beneath the sound of rain tapping against the roof. But Hayes heard them, and instead of reconsidering, his expression hardened, the decision already locked in place. Because in his mind, this wasn't a question of truth, it was a matter of control, and right now, he believed he had it completely. What he didn't realize, not yet, was that every second of this encounter was unfolding exactly the way it needed to, just not for him. Vanessa stepped out of the car slowly, the rain immediately catching in her hair and tracing soft lines down her face. But she did not rush, did not stumble, did not give them the reaction they seemed to expect. Instead, she closed the door gently behind her, the solid click echoing louder than it should have in the tense air, and for a brief second, everything felt still, like the entire street was holding its breath, watching to see what she would do next. Officer Hayes moved closer, positioning himself just slightly in front of her, as if to establish control over a situation that had not yet slipped, but was already beginning to shift in ways he could not see. "Turn around," he said, his voice sharper now, louder, drawing even more attention as a few more cars slowed, their headlights stretching across the wet pavement. and somewhere in the background, a phone camera adjusted focus, capturing every second. Vanessa did not immediately move, not out of defiance, but with the same measured pause she had shown before, like someone calculating the weight of each moment. And then she complied, turning calmly, her hands visible, her posture still composed, still unshaken. Hayes reached for his radio, speaking quickly, calling in the stop with a tone that suggested certainty, not suspicion, like he had already decided how this would end. His partner shifted uneasily, glancing between Vanessa and the growing number of onlookers. Something about the situation not sitting right, but not enough to interrupt, not enough to challenge. Not yet. You said it is your car, Hayes continued, circling slightly, his eyes scanning her again, searching for something that matched the version of her he had already created in his mind. Then you will not mind explaining how you got it. Vanessa lifted her chin just slightly, not confrontational, just steady. I already told you, she said quietly. You might want to double-check. The words landed again, calm, controlled, almost patient, and for a fraction of a second, Hayes hesitated, but it was subtle, barely visible, and it vanished just as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the same rigid confidence, because in his world, hesitation was weakness, and he was not about to show that here, not in front of a crowd, not in front of someone he believed he understood. He gestured toward the car. Run. The plates, he called to his partner, who nodded and stepped back toward the patrol vehicle, typing quickly into the system as rain tapped against the screen. Seconds stretched, long enough for tension to settle deeper into the air, long enough for whispers to begin among the small crowd forming along the sidewalk, some curious, some judgmental, some already deciding what they believed they were witnessing. Vanessa stood still, her eyes briefly shifting toward the street, not searching for help, but watching, observing, like she was waiting for something that had not arrived yet. And then, almost absent-mindedly, she glanced down at her watch. A small movement, but precise, intentional. Hayes noticed it, his brow tightening slightly. You in a hurry? He asked, a hint of sarcasm slipping through. Vanessa looked back at him, her expression unchanged. No, she said, just on time. The answer lingered, strange in its calmness, strange in its certainty, and before Hayes could respond, his partner called out from behind, voice uncertain now. Hey, Daniel. There was a pause, the kind that did not belong in routine traffic stops. You might want to see this. Hayes turned, irritation flashing briefly across his face, not because of what was said, but how it was said, that tone, that hesitation. It did not fit the narrative he had already built, and as he took a step toward the patrol car, the rain seemed to grow heavier, the lights brighter, the moment stretching just a little further than expected, like something was about to break. Through the surface, something that would not fit inside his version of control, something he was not ready to face. Hayes stopped mid-step as he reached the patrol vehicle, the rain now steady enough to blur the reflections of flashing lights across the windshield. His partner stood frozen beside the open door, one hand still resting near the keyboard, the other gripping the edge of the frame like he needed something solid to hold on to. What is it? Hayes asked, irritation edging into his voice, but there was something else underneath it now, something quieter, something he was not ready to name. His partner turned the screen slightly, not dramatically, just enough for Hayes to see. And for a moment, Hayes did not react. His eyes moved across the information once, then again, slower this time, like his mind was trying to rearrange it into something that made sense, something that matched the version of reality he had already committed to. But it did not. The registered owner matched, the identification checked out, every detail aligned in a way that left no room for doubt. And yet doubt was exactly what filled the space between them. Run it again, Hayes said, his voice lower now, more controlled. But the edge was gone, replaced by something tighter. His partner hesitated, then nodded, fingers moving quickly, repeating the process, the seconds stretching longer this time. Heavier, the kind of silence that does not belong in routine procedure. Behind them, Vanessa remained exactly where she was, standing calmly in the rain, her gaze steady, not fixed on them, not searching for their reaction, but simply waiting, as if she already knew how this moment would unfold. As if she had seen it before in different forms, different faces. The crowd had grown slightly, phones still raised, capturing, commenting, forming their own narratives in real time. Some voices quiet, others not. What is taking so long? Someone muttered from the sidewalk, the question hanging in the air like pressure building before a storm. Hayes exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening as he looked back at Vanessa. Really looked this time, not at her clothes, not at the car, but at her composure, her stillness, the way she did not shift under the weight of attention. And something about that unsettled him more than any database ever could. "Ma'am," he called out, the words sounding different now, less sharp, more measured, but still holding on to authority like a shield. "I am going to need you to explain." "No." Vanessa interrupted gently, not raising her voice, not stepping forward, just enough to stop him, just enough to redirect the moment without breaking it. Hayes blinked, caught off guard not by the interruption itself, but by the calm certainty behind it. She met his eyes again, unwavering. "You already have everything you need," she said, her tone steady, almost patient, like she was guiding him towards something he had not yet reached. Hayes felt the shift, small but undeniable, like the ground beneath a situation beginning to move in ways he could not control, and before he could respond, before he could reassert the structure he had built, a new sound cut through the rain, low at first, then unmistakable, the hum of a vehicle approaching with purpose, not slowing, not hesitating, headlights slicing through the night as a black government-issued SUV pulled up behind the patrol car, its presence immediate, commanding, the kind that does not ask for space but takes it. The door opened before the engine fully settled, and a man stepped out, tall, composed, dressed in a dark suit that seemed untouched by the weather, his eyes scanning the scene once, taking in everything, the officers, the crowd, Vanessa, and when his gaze landed on her, it did not question, it confirmed. Hayes turned, his pulse tightening, the control he had held on to slipping just enough for uncertainty to take its place, because this was no longer just a traffic stop. And somewhere deep down, even before a single word was spoken, he knew something had already gone very, very wrong. The man did not rush as he stepped forward, even with the rain falling steadily around him. His pace controlled, deliberate, the kind of presence that shifted attention without a single word needing to be spoken. The crowd instinctively quieted, phones still raised but movement slowing, as if something unspoken had entered the scene and demanded focus. Hayes straightened slightly, instinct kicking in, posture adjusting as he tried to reassert control over a situation that no longer felt entirely his. "Sir, this is an active stop," he said, voice firm but no longer as certain as before. The man did not respond immediately, his eyes moving past Hayes, landing on Vanessa, and for the first time since the stop began, there was a change, subtle but unmistakable. Vanessa gave the slightest nod, not relief, not fear, but recognition, confirmation, like a signal between two people who did not need to explain anything out loud. The man returned the nod just as slightly, then shifted, his attention back to Hayes, his expression calm, composed, but carrying a weight that did not need volume to be felt. "I am aware," he said, his voice even, measured, with the kind of clarity that cut through the noise of rain and distant traffic without effort. Hayes hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough for the balance to tilt further away from him. "Then you understand we are conducting an investigation," Hayes continued, holding on to procedure like it was the last stable ground beneath him. The man stepped closer now, close enough for the details to settle, the badge clipped inside his jacket catching a faint reflection of the patrol lights, not displayed, not flashed, just there, present, undeniable. "And I understand exactly what you are investigating," he replied, his tone unchanged, but something in the phrasing shifted the air, made the words feel heavier than they should have been. Hayes frowned slightly, confusion threading into his expression. "Sir, with all due respect," the man repeated softly, not interrupting, but reframing, his gaze steady on Hayes, "is precisely why I am here." The sentence lingered, not aggressive, not confrontational, but precise, like each word had been chosen long before this moment. Behind them, Hayes's partner stepped back from the patrol car, eyes flicking between the screen and the man now standing in front of them, the uncertainty growing more visible. harder to ignore. Vanessa remained where she was, the rain continuing to fall around her. But now she seemed less like the center of the situation and more like the point everything else was orbiting around. Hayes shifted his weight. The confidence he had started with now fractured into pieces he was trying to hold together. "Can you identify yourself?" he asked, the question coming out sharper than intended, as if volume could restore what control had already slipped. The man reached into his jacket slowly, deliberately, every movement visible, every second stretched, not for tension, but for clarity. He removed a slim leather holder and opened it just enough for Hayes to see. Not waving it, not forcing it forward, just presenting it, calm, controlled. Hayes's eyes dropped to it, and for a moment, the world around him seemed to narrow, the flashing lights, the rain, the murmurs from the crowd, all fading into the background as recognition settled in, slow but undeniable. His breath caught, not visibly, not dramatically, but enough to break the rhythm he had held on to since the beginning. And when he looked back up, the man was already watching him, not with anger, not with accusation, but with something far more unsettling, understanding. "Now," the man said quietly, "let us take a step back and look at what you have actually done here." And for the first time that night, Hayes did not have an immediate answer. The rain continued to fall, steady and indifferent, as if the world itself had decided to remain neutral while everything beneath it shifted. Hayes stood there, the small leather badge holder still fresh in his mind, its meaning settling in deeper with every passing second, not loud, not dramatic, but heavy, undeniable, like a truth he could not push aside no matter how hard he tried. His fingers flexed slightly at his side, a subtle movement, almost invisible, but enough to betray the tension. "Building beneath the surface, sir," he began, but the word lacked direction now, no longer anchored in authority, more a reflex than a command. The man in front of him did not move, did not raise his voice, did not escalate, and somehow that made everything feel more serious, more final. "Let us keep this simple," the man said, his tone even, almost calm enough to be mistaken for casual. But there was precision behind it, intention in every syllable. "You initiated a stop based on suspicion," he continued. "You escalated it publicly, and you maintained that position even after confirmation was available." Hayes swallowed, the sequence laid out in such a clear, structured way that it left little room for reinterpretation, little room for defense. His partner shifted again near the patrol car, now fully silent, no longer pretending this was routine. The crowd had grown quieter too, not because they understood everything, but because they could feel it, the shift, the weight of something turning. Vanessa finally moved, just a step forward, not toward Hayes, not toward the man, but into the space between them, her presence steady, controlled, as if she had been waiting for this exact moment, not reacting, not catching up, but arriving exactly on time. She looked at Hayes, not with anger, not with triumph, but with something far more unsettling, clarity. "Officer," she said, her voice soft but unmistakably firm. "You asked how I got the car." Hayes met her gaze, and for the first time, he did not interrupt, did not challenge, did not redirect. He just listened, because something in him understood that whatever came next would not fit into the version of events he had built. "I did not just get the car," she continued. "I was assigned the car." The word assigned hung there, subtle but loaded, shifting the context in a way that did not need explanation, yet still demanded it. Hayes's brow tightened, confusion and realization colliding in uneven waves. The man beside her glanced briefly at Vanessa, a silent acknowledgement, then back to Hayes. "She is not here by accident," he said, "and neither are we." The sentence landed with quiet force, not explosive, not confrontational, but final in a way that left no room for dismissal. Hayes's partner took a slow step forward, as if pulled into the gravity of the moment. "Daniel," he said under his breath, not a warning, not a correction, just a recognition that things had already crossed a line they could not step back over. Hayes exhaled slowly, the sound barely audible beneath the rain, but inside, everything felt louder, sharper, the flashing lights, now less like authority and more like exposure. The eyes from the crowd no longer just watching, but witnessing, and somewhere in that realization, the first crack appeared, not visible, not spoken, but real. What is this? Hayes asked finally, the question no longer carrying control, but searching for it. Vanessa did not answer immediately. She let the silence sit, let it stretch just long enough to make the weight of the moment fully settle. And then she spoke, calm as ever. This, she said, is exactly what you thought it was. She paused, just a fraction, her eyes never leaving his. You just did not realize who you were doing it to. And in that instant, the situation did not explode, it did not escalate. It simply shifted completely, like a door quietly closing behind him, leaving Hayes standing on the other side of something he could no longer control. The silence that followed did not feel empty. It felt full, heavy with everything that had not been said yet. Hayes stood there, rain tracing lines down his uniform, his mind moving faster now, trying to catch up, trying to reassemble control from pieces that no longer fit together the way they had just minutes ago. Assigned. He repeated quietly, the word no longer sounding simple, no longer something he could dismiss with a quick explanation. Vanessa watched him without pressure, without urgency, as if she understood exactly where he was in that moment, as if she had seen that look before, the moment when certainty begins to collapse under the weight of truth. The man beside her took a small step forward, not aggressive, not dominating, just enough to close the distance, enough to make it clear that this conversation had moved beyond routine. Officer Hayes, he said, his voice still calm, but now carrying a sharper edge of clarity. What you are standing in right now is not just a traffic stop. Hayes straightened slightly at the sound of his name, the familiarity of it landing differently now, no longer neutral, no longer procedural, but precise, intentional. This vehicle, the man continued, gesturing lightly toward the car without looking away from Hayes, is part of an active federal operation. The words did not come fast. They were measured, each one placed carefully, leaving no room for misunderstanding. Hayes blinked, once, slow, the meaning settling in. Decision-making under pressure. Hayes felt the words land deeper than they should have, not because they were loud, but because they were specific, targeted. And tonight, she continued, you followed that pattern exactly. The statement was not an accusation, not raised in anger, but that made it worse, because it left no space for argument, no room for interpretation, just observation. Hayes glanced briefly toward the crowd. The phone still raised, the lights still flashing, everything still being captured, recorded, preserved, and suddenly those lights did not feel like authority anymore. They felt like exposure, like evidence, like something permanent. He looked back at Vanessa, then at the man, the weight of the situation now fully pressing in. You set this up, he said, the words coming out slower than expected, not sharp, not confrontational, but searching. The man shook his head slightly, almost immediately. No, he said, we did not set you up. He paused just enough for the distinction to settle. We gave you a moment. Hayes frowned, confusion threading through again, but weaker now, less certain. A moment to do what? He asked, and for the first time, Vanessa's expression softened just slightly, not sympathy, not pity, but something closer to truth. To choose, she said simply, the word landing with quiet finality. Hayes inhaled slowly. The rain, the lights, the crowd, all still there, but now distant, blurred behind the realization forming in front of him, because this was not about the car, not about the stop, not even about the moment itself. It was about the decision he had already made long before he stepped out of that patrol vehicle, and standing there now, with everything laid out in front of him, he understood something he could not undo. He had not just made a mistake, he had revealed one. The word lingered in the air long after she said it. Choose, simple, almost gentle, but it echoed louder than the flashing lights, louder than the rain tapping against the pavement, louder than the quiet murmurs from the crowd that had now grown still, watching something they did not fully understand but could feel shifting in front of them. Hayes stood frozen for a moment, not physically, but internally, like his thoughts had slowed just enough to let the weight of everything catch up to him. His eyes moved from Vanessa to the man beside her, then briefly to his partner, who no longer avoided his gaze, who no longer pretended this was just another call. There was no script left to follow, no routine to hide behind, only the reality of what had already been done. This was not about the car, Hayes said finally, his voice lower now, not defensive, not commanding, just trying to piece something together. Vanessa gave a small nod, not confirming, not correcting, just acknowledging that he was starting to see it. It never was, she replied quietly, the calm in her voice unchanged, unwavering, and somehow that calm made everything feel sharper, clearer, harder to escape. The man beside her stepped slightly to the side, giving just enough space for the moment to settle fully between Hayes and Vanessa, like this part belonged to them now, like this was the point where understanding either arrived or it did not. Every interaction tells a story, Vanessa continued, her eyes steady on his. Not just about the person you stop, but about the person you are when you stop them. Hayes felt the words land deeper than anything that had been said before, because they did not accuse, they revealed. And there was no easy way to argue with something that was already visible to everyone around them. He glanced again toward the crowd, the phones, the quiet faces watching, and for the first time, he did not see judgment. He saw reflection, like every movement he had made was now being held up for others to understand, to interpret, to remember. His partner shifted closer now, standing just behind him, not stepping in, not interrupting, but present, fully aware that whatever came next would not be undone by silence. The man in the suit checked his watch briefly, not impatient, just marking time, as if this moment had already been accounted for, as if everything unfolding was part of something larger than the street they stood on. Hayes exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing just slightly, not because the situation had improved, but because resisting it no longer made sense. So what happens now? He asked, and there was no edge left in his voice, no attempt to control the answer, just a question, honest and exposed in a way he had not allowed himself to be before. Vanessa looked at him for a moment, studying not his uniform, not his posture, but him, the person beneath all of it, and when she spoke, her voice was as calm as it had been from the beginning. Now, she said, the truth moves forward. The sentence was simple, but it carried weight, direction, inevitability. The man beside her nodded once, subtle, confirming. Everything from this stop, he added, is being documented, reviewed, and processed. Hayes nodded slightly, almost automatically, not in agreement, but in recognition, because at this point, there was nothing else to do. The decision had already been made, not by them, but by him, minutes earlier, when he first stepped out of that patrol vehicle and chose what he chose. And standing there now, with the rain falling and the lights still flashing, he understood something that would stay with him far longer than this moment. Power does not define who you are, it reveals it. The rain did not stop, but it no longer felt like part of the tension. It felt like background, like something distant compared to what had just unfolded in front of everyone. Hayes stood there a moment longer, then slowly stepped back, not ordered, not forced, just instinctively creating space, as if he finally understood that the center of control had shifted completely away from him. The flashing lights behind him still pulsed in red and blue, but they no longer felt like authority. They felt like a record, like a marker of a moment that would not fade. Vanessa turned slightly, her attention moving from Hayes to the man beside her, and for the first time since the stop began, there was a quiet exchange between them that did not need words, just a brief look, a subtle nod, confirmation that everything that needed to happen had already happened. The man reached into his jacket again, this time retrieving a small device, holding it at his side, not displaying it, just activating something unseen. And somewhere within the patrol vehicle, a soft alert sounded. Hayes's partner glanced back at the system, his expression tightening as new information populated the screen, layers of data, timestamps, cross-references, everything aligning into a narrative that no longer belonged to interpretation, only to fact. Hayes followed the movement, his eyes catching the shift in his partner's posture. And he did not need to see the screen to understand what it meant. He had already felt it, already recognized it in the way the conversation had changed, the way control had slipped without force, without confrontation, just through truth. The man in the suit stepped forward slightly, his presence steady, composed. "Officer Hayes," he said, not loudly, not sharply, but clearly enough to anchor the moment. "Your body camera, the patrol system, and external recordings are now all part of a formal review. Hayes nodded once, small, controlled, not resisting, not agreeing, just acknowledging what was already in motion. The crowd began to shift again, some lowering their phones, others whispering, the tension transforming into something quieter, more reflective, like the moment had passed, but the meaning had not. Vanessa walked back toward her car, not rushed, not hesitant, just moving forward, reclaiming the space she had never actually lost. Her hand resting briefly on the door before she paused, turning her head slightly back toward Hayes, not to confront, not to correct, but to leave something behind. This was never about proving you wrong, she said calmly, her voice carrying just enough to reach him without drawing the crowd back in. It was about showing what happens when assumptions make decisions. Hayes met her eyes, and this time, there was no resistance there, no attempt to reinterpret what had already been made clear, just understanding, quiet and heavy. Vanessa opened the door and sat inside, the interior light briefly, illuminating her face before fading again as the door closed softly. The engine remained running, steady, unchanged, as if the car itself had been waiting for this exact moment to move again. The man in the suit stepped back toward his vehicle, pausing only long enough to glance once more at Hayes, not with judgment, not with anger, but with something far more lasting, certainty. The outcome, he said quietly, was never in our hands. He let the words settle, then added, "It was in yours." Hayes stood still as the man turned away, the SUV door closing with a muted sound, the vehicle pulling away slowly, merging back into the flow of traffic as if it had never interrupted it at all. One by one, the lights began to feel less intense, the street returning to its normal rhythm. But nothing about the moment felt normal anymore, because even as the rain continued to fall and the traffic resumed, Hayes understood that what had just happened would not stay on this street. It would move forward, documented, reviewed, remembered, and long after the lights were gone and the road was empty, the choice he made would still be there, unchanged. The street slowly returned to motion, cars passing through the wet glow of traffic lights, tires slicing through shallow puddles as if nothing had happened. But for Hayes, everything had shifted in a way that would not fade with distance or time. He remained standing beside his patrol vehicle, the engine still idling, the radio quiet now, his partner a few feet away, silent, giving space not out of protocol, but out of understanding that this moment was no longer something to be handled. It was something to be carried. Hayes looked down briefly, the rain dripping from the brim of his cap, then lifted his gaze toward the road where the black Mercedes had already merged back into the flow of traffic, disappearing not dramatically, not abruptly, but steadily, like it had never needed to fight for its place there in the first place. And that realization settled deeper than anything else, not the badge, not the operation, not even the presence of federal authority, but the fact that none of this had required force to change direction. Only truth, only exposure. His partner finally spoke, his voice low, cautious. "Daniel, you okay?" The question hung there, simple, human, and Hayes did not answer immediately, not because he did not hear it, but because the answer was not simple, not something that could be given in a word or two. He exhaled slowly. "I still on the road?" "Yeah," he said quietly, but the word did not carry certainty. It carried recognition. The kind that comes when something inside you has been revealed in a way you cannot ignore. His partner nodded slightly, not pushing further, both of them understanding that whatever came next would not be decided here, not on this street, not in this moment. Hayes reached up and turned off the overhead lights, the flashing red and blue fading into darkness, and for the first time since the stop began, the street looked normal again, but it did not feel the same, not to him. Because now every reflection, every passing car, every face in the distance felt like part of something larger, something that had already begun moving beyond him, beyond this moment, into reports, into reviews, into conversations he would not be able to control. He walked back toward the patrol car slowly, each step measured, not rushed, not hesitant, just aware of the weight that followed him now. As he reached the door, he paused, his hand resting briefly on the handle, and for a second, the scene replayed in his mind, not as it had happened, but as it had felt. the assumption, the certainty, the decision made before the facts, and then the shift, quiet, undeniable, irreversible. He closed his eyes briefly, not to escape it, but to face it fully, because there was no version of this where he could walk away unchanged. Not anymore. He opened the door and sat inside. The familiar space now different in a way he could not explain. The same controls, the same dashboard, but none of it carried the same certainty it had before. His partner joined him a moment later, neither of them speaking as the engine continued to hum softly. And after a few seconds, Hay spoke again, not looking at his partner, not looking anywhere in particular, just forward. "It was not the car," he said, quietly, more to himself than anyone else. "It was never the car." The words settled in the silence that followed, and outside, the rain continued to fall, steady, constant, washing over the street, over the lights, over the place where everything had changed without a single moment of force. Only truth, only a choice, and somewhere far ahead, beyond the reach of flashing lights and passing traffic, that truth would keep moving, long after this night had ended, because he thought he was enforcing the law. But that night, the law had quietly revealed him.